Beautiful song, beautiful song. Let's give it up one more time. Jesus, God is good. All right, we have a packed morning. Thank you, worship team. Thank you, beautiful, beautiful. You may be seated. We have a video media. If you can cue that video, I'll appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Every generation has a number of outstanding, faithful men and women of God. Gordon and Frida Lindsay were exceptional Christian pioneers in their generation. In April of 1948, Gordon Lindsay launched the monthly Voice of Healing magazine to share updates of healing campaigns and testify of the many miracles happening in these campaigns. Later, he would coordinate the efforts of around 100 healing evangelists to launch overseas healing campaigns. With so many coming to Christ through these international campaigns, it was evident that evangelistic discipleship materials were needed. To meet this need, Gordon Lindsay established the Native Literature Program, which continues to this day. Shortly after the founding of Christ for the Nations Institute, Gordon went to be with the Lord. The year was 1973. His widow Frida picked up the mantle and led Christ for the Nations for the next 35 years. During that time, Frida met with world leaders, including U.S. presidents, fervently supported the nation of Israel, established several international Bible schools and global outreach efforts, which continue to this day. She faithfully followed the guidance of the Holy Spirit as she led this influential Bible-based organization. Gordon and Frida Lindsay were truly Christian pioneers and visionaries whose legacy continues through their children, grandchildren, and CFNI alumni around the world.
I have never introduced my own self. Anyway, as I said, that is all for our Legacy Day. Alex, when is our Legacy Day again? Next week, what day? Wednesday? Wednesday. All right, it is Wednesday. It's going to be Wednesday. Whatever you do, ensure that you are here. We are here because of Gordon and Frida Lindsay. We're standing on the shoulders of giants. We would have never been here had it not been for those two people. So always remember those who went before us and paved the way. So that video, and you will see some other videos. We're going to be talking about what they did and how God led them to start CFNI back in 1970. Anyway, this morning, as I said, we have a packed morning. So we have an amazing and incredible woman of God as our guest speaker. I want to read her bio a little bit. I met her, I think, 2 years ago, and we were so impacted by her and what God has placed inside of her that we decided to bring her to Christ for the Nations to be a blessing to you guys. So let me read it because she has an extensive bio, but I want you to understand the caliber of person that you have with us, that we have with us today. All right, so Dr. Jade, John Chia's passion for culture comes from living in Korea, Germany, California, and also here in Dallas. She's an avid foodie, cook, traveler, group fitness instructor at Lifetime Fitness, and she's also a musician. Dr. Chia was a former youth and college minister at Dallas Chinese Baptist Church and was the director of the MA, that's Master of Arts International Studies, at Dallas Baptist University. Dr. Chia is a certified consultant, facilitator, and lecturer at the Cultural Intelligence Center. She has taught workshops on cultural intelligence and unconscious bias for various institutions such as Azusa Pacific University, Crew Neighbors Simpson University, which one is this? Gordon College, Richardson Police Department, Phillips Health Tech, and Dallas Theological Seminary, among others. Dr. Chia earned her PhD at the Cook School of Leadership at Dallas Baptist University, where she's an adjunct faculty member. She's also an adjunct faculty member at CFNI here. Come on, let's give it up for that. And she's also an adjunct faculty member at Criswell College, that's downtown. She's currently the children's ministry deacon at the Dallas Chinese Bible Church. Dr. Chia and her husband John are active members at the church, and they have 2 sons. Will you stand with me this morning and let's welcome to Christ for the Nations this incredibly anointed and educated woman of God. So grateful to have you. Thank you so much.
Please take a seat. While we get set up, hello, shout out to my second-year students who saw me this morning. All right, I see you raising your hands. My name is Dr. Jade Chia. I am ethnically Korean. My husband is an ABC, in other words, American-born Chinese. Born in Richmond, Virginia. His parents are Taiwanese. So my kids are between, well, they call themselves 100% Korean, 100% Chinese, and 100% American. So they're 300%. I just want you to know there's no Bible in this lecture, okay? I know, it's shocking. They're like, get this heretic out. But you know, once in a while, we need to learn about things that are happening in this world, and that does not always include Bible, but it does include a Christian perspective. So today we're talking about managing unconscious bias, right? And the objectives for today, by the way, this is a 2-part lecture series. You're only getting one part of it, and only my second-year students on Thursday will get the second part of it. So they're like, yes! Okay, no. Let's not get too excited. All right, so understand why bias matters. We're going to talk about recognized sources of unconscious bias, identify bias in organizations and institutions, and I'm just going to say everybody has bias. Okay, everybody, all right? Practice culturally intelligent strategies and disrupt bias. This might be the most academic lecture you've ever received in this room, just letting you know, okay? So pay good attention. If you play on your phone for 2 minutes, you'll get lost and you won't be able to catch up. That's how fast I move, okay? For those of you who have me in class, I talk 100 miles per hour. All right, so cultural intelligence. Let's talk about cultural intelligence. Cultural intelligence is the capability to function and relate effectively in culturally diverse situations, right? Look around this room. Look around this room. We're talking about culturally diverse situation. This is a culturally diverse situation, okay? I have taught an institution where everybody in the room looks exactly the same. You are in a culturally diverse situation, but culture does not end by the way we look or where we come from. It could be generations. I love to give this example. As I said, I have 2 sons. One is turning 12 and one is turning 7. They like to play and watch YouTube or watch people play games on YouTube, which makes 0 sense to me, right? And then they're really into Minecraft. So at breakfast, okay, so at breakfast, they would talk to each other in this weird Minecraft language, right? And they're like, don't ever dig down, whatever that means. I don't know what that means, but apparently you're not supposed to dig down, okay? So I am their mother. We live in the same house. We are technically the same culture, but there's a generational gap, which is also a cultural difference. Right? There are things that I don't understand what they're saying. Sometimes you talk about games, and I'm like, who? Let me give you another example. My kids like to throw their stuffies in the fridge and freezer, which I don't know why. Like Pokemon that are ice types need to go in our actual freezer because they have to practice. So sometimes at home, I open the freezer and there's a Mew in my freezer, right? And I'm like, what is happening? And then the other day there was oh crap, I'm gonna get this wrong. So there was a Legends of Zelda character in my fridge, and I called it something else. I was like, oh, why is there a, what did I call it? I called it a link. Why is there a link in my fridge? And my husband's like, don't say that in front of the kids. They'll make fun of you, right? Because apparently I can't get anybody's name right. Generational gap. I have to learn how to adapt and be able to talk to my own children because there is a cultural gap, right? So it doesn't always apply for where you're from, what different country, of different culture, socioeconomic status, your subculture, your religion, all of that is a different culture, okay? So all of that to say, let's go back even further and say, what is culture? What is culture? Culture is the way you have been programmed to see life. Everybody pick up your phone and wave it at me, right? What you are holding in your hand is your hardware, okay? Without the software, that thing is just a very expensive piece of metal with very expensive glass, okay? What runs the system? The software. Your culture is your software. It is the way you have been programmed to see life. Nobody is born and says, nobody comes out of their mom's womb and says, yes, I know exactly what I'm going to think today, right? No, from the day you are born, somebody is programming something inside of you. And what is cold, what is hot, what is this, what is that, right? For example, and this is also one of my favorite examples, is that my in-laws and my parents believe that if you are cold, you will catch a cold, right? How many of you have heard that growing up? If you're cold, put on a jacket or you're gonna get sick. Put on a jacket or you're gonna catch a cold. Now, for those of you who have any medical knowledge, is that how you get sick? No. How do you get sick? Bacteria, virus, right? So my son, who's 11 and 12 and very, he's a very engineer mind. Everything is factual. My in-laws, who his grandma and grandpa, like to take him to school in the morning. They argue about a jacket almost every morning. And my son runs hot. He sweats eating ice cream, okay? Like, that's how hot he runs, okay? So my in-laws are like, JJ, put on a jacket or you're gonna get sick. And he's like, that's not how you get sick. They're like, you're going to get sick. No, that's not how you get sick. You only get sick by cold, by getting a virus or bacterial infection. And they're like, no, you're gonna get sick. So I was like, JJ, just put on the jacket. Put on the jacket for grandma and grandpa and take it off when you're at school, okay? Learn how to adapt for grandma and grandpa, please, right? So that's just, right? But that's his cultural programming. His grandparents told him since he was born, or told me, that if JJ is cold, he's going to get sick, right? Why do they believe that when they too, they're very smart people, but they still believe that because that is the way they've been programmed to see life. So all of this today, everything we're going to talk about, I want you to think about your programming. What did your parents tell you growing up? What did they tell you to believe? What did they tell you not to believe, right? We did this exercise in class, and I found out some very interesting things, like in Brazil, you're not supposed to cut your hair on when the full moon, or something like that. There was like all these different kind of things. Superstitions also been programmed to you since the day you were born, right? All of these things have been programmed. Think about your programming. What is actually true and what is actually not, right? In other words, culture is what is accepted and familiar. If we had a lot of time, I would do a game about what you would be willing to eat and what you're not. But a lot of the times, the things you're not willing to eat is because you're not used to them, right? If I took all of you and said, we're going to go to a certain part of, speaking of which, my son was like, do you know in China they eat snakes? I was like, do you know in Texas they eat snakes? Right? So I was like, well, I don't know why'd you have to say about China, man? They eat it in Amarillo, right? I was like, you can get it in Texas. It's called rattlesnake. Anyway, so I'm just saying, if you're not used to seeing that stuff on your plate. I went to Mexico. I stayed there for 6 weeks in Guadalajara, right? A lot of fun. I was in Guadalajara for 6 weeks, and this pastor's family made us this amazing rabbit stew. And I was just like, I don't care, it's meat, I'll eat it, right? But then there's some of my friends who were with me. They come from a small town in the US who saw the rabbit stew and said, ew, I can't eat that. What did you say? We're on a mission trip and you just said, ew, I can't eat that? How dare you, right? You should have seen my insides. They were like boiling. I almost slugged them on a mission trip. I had to repent. But I understand why they said, ew. They're not used to eating rabbit, right? if you're not used to something, if you're not familiar with something, you are naturally programmed to be scared of it, okay? That is human instinct. If you're not familiar with it, you run from it, okay? Your job as a Christian, and especially if you plan to do missions, is not to run from it, okay? The only way you don't run from it is to be able to identify it. When you can identify it, you're no longer scared of it, okay? That is our goal today. So a lot of the times when we are unfamiliar with something or we are familiar with something, we kind of work with our biases. So let's actually talk about what is bias, okay? Bias is attitudes and beliefs we have about a person or group on a conscious level. That's explicit bias, right? You are very aware of what you believe and don't believe. It's explicit, so it's right in front of you, right? Whereas your unconscious, implicit bias is you're not aware that you have these biases because they were programmed into you as a child, but you never took the time to think about them. This is an example I like to give, which I'm actually very ashamed of, right? So when I was growing up, I grew up in the States, and then I went back to Korea for 4 years. My grandmother was a flat-out racist, okay? And in some ways, I don't blame her because her context of African-American people was Hollywood. And if you think about back then, Hollywood only made African Americans the bad people, okay? That's all she saw. That was her programming. So when she knew I came from the States, she said, stay away from black people. They're going to kill you with a gun. And I said, excuse me? Right? I was like, no, my African American friends on the playground don't have guns. I don't know what you're talking about, right? But that was her programming, okay? Actually, I think I feel like I'm less safe here than I am anywhere else. So I don't know what you're talking about. But anyway, that was her programming. That's what she believed because that's all she saw about African American. How would she, in the middle of Seoul, run into an African American person to find out that they're just regular, normal people, right? She had no context. All she saw was what Hollywood gave her, right? Her unconscious bias, the programming that came into her became very explicit, right? And then that's what she said. I told my mom I didn't like what grandmother said, and she's like, don't argue with your grandma, it's not gonna work. She doesn't believe you, right? So now, okay, this is the hardest part of this lecture, okay? Pay close attention. System 1, your intuitive thinking. If I ask you to walk from here to, what's that thing, Golden Chick over there? Yeah. If I asked you to walk from here to Golden Chick, do you need Google Maps? Gosh, I hope not. All right? So you should be able to walk from here to Golden Chick without thinking, right? Automatic. If I ask you to go from here to your dorm room or wherever you live, hopefully by now, since the end of the semester, you don't need Google Maps to get home, okay? But if I ask everybody here to get up and we're gonna all drive to my house, do you need Google Maps? Yes. In other words, you have to be very aware of your surroundings. You have to pay close attention, okay? I'm going to say system 1 is unconscious. You can do things without thinking. System 2, you have to do it while you're alert and you're thinking. Now, let me tell you this. When you're on missions, you don't get to be on system 1. When you're on missions, you have to be on system 2. And the reason why you have to be on system 2 is when you're on system 1, that is when Satan loves it. Why? Because you're not thinking. You just think, that is also when pride sets in, where you can just be like, oh, I got this. I've done missions trips so many times. I know what I'm doing. I know this culture. We're fine. That's when your guard is down. System 2 would mean that you are conscious, you're aware, and you're on your knees, okay? That's the difference. Now, when you're in a cross-cultural situation, which is pretty much everywhere you go, a lot of the times you have to be on system 2. Because when we're on system 1 is when we make mistakes. When we're on system 2, this is very academic. So when we're on system 2 is when we're very deliberate, when we love each other, minister each other, be aware of each other. So that is what you want to be on, okay? And you're like, what does that have to do with unconscious bias? Okay, now going back to system 1 and 2, when we're on, going back, unconscious, system 1, right? A lot of the times, we go from system 2 to system 1 when these things come into play. So system 2, right, you're aware, you're conscious, you're alert. It's the beginning of the school year. You had enough sleep, you got to rest all summer, you're ready to go, right? Halfway through the semester, you're tired, you're pressured, like you're distracted. It is very normal for you to fall into system 1, where you're unconscious of how you are acting, doing, and saying, and even ministering to each other, right? You stop going on your knees because you're busy. You stop going on your knees because you're time pressure. And you stop going on your knees because you're distracted, right? System 1, system 2. You want to stay in system 2. Now, let's say you're working at a job, right, after you graduate here, or maybe you're working right now. A lot of employees who receive bias, right, employees who perceive bias, I feel like when I go to work, somebody is biased against me, right? So 75% are not proud of the work that they do in their company because it's emotionally draining for you to be there, right? Regularly feel alienated at work. For some reason, you're just not in the in-group. And you don't know why you're not in the in-group. And then they're busting out. They're already looking for new jobs while they're at your job because they don't want to stay there anymore. And the last thing is purposely fail to follow through an assignment and a task the last 6 months. And this is the one that the police department hates, right? 5% made negative comments about their employer on social media. 5% of a company is a lot. You know why? It's called retweeting. I guess it's not tweeting anymore, it's Xing, right? If you know what I mean, right? So if you repost, your company is in trouble. Your institution is in trouble and your church is in trouble, all right? Especially if, trust me, I've worked in enough churches where if a lot of bad rumors start going around, nobody wants to work at that church. And maybe there's a good reason for it, or you need to take a hard look at your church and what they're doing and how they are treating each other. Okay, if you are a reader, if you love to read, these are some of the books that I recommend, right? Is there a way to get this list out to the students? All right, oh yeah, I'll talk to Alex later. All right, now, by the way, this is 2 hours that I'm trying to make into 1 hour, so I'm going really fast. Emotional safety. Emotional safety is the extent which people feel comfortable bringing their whole self to work. I have an African-American coworker at DBU who tells me that Texas is so hot and she would love to braid her hair to come to class, or to teach in class. She's a faculty member. And I said, then just braid your hair. And she said, I cannot, because it's not considered proper. And I was like, braiding your hair is not proper if you're faculty? She's like, oh, trust me, it's not, right? There are certain things that are unacceptable to just be able to come as yourself in a place because it's not considered mainstream. That is not how you dress in this institution. Now, apply that to a church. Does your church provide emotional safety, right? If your church allows people to come dress whatever way they want because they're just there to serve Jesus, then that's great. You should do that. Your church should allow that, right? I understand there's some kind of dress code when it comes to institutions, work where you work, all of that, I understand that. But when you're talking about worshiping Jesus, if you're going to put a dress code on, then you might as well tell some populations that they're not welcome, all right? And you never, ever, ever want to be that or be there, right? There's some people, I went to a very conservative Presbyterian church for a while, and they did not allow guys to wear hats, like baseball hats or whatever. They're like, that's inappropriate. And I'm like, really? Because Jesus can't see their face? Like, what's wrong with you, right? So the question is, do the people who are in your congregation, who are in your classroom, who are in your jobs, do they feel like they can't bring their whole self? Or do you provide or create a culture, an environment where people feel like they can bring their whole selves to work? They can express who they are without having the fear of being ridiculed, right? Now, a lot of the times, because of the unsafe emotional environment, a lot of people cover. They feel like they can't say what they want to say, mean what they want to say, all those things. To cover is to downplay a disfavored trait and to blend into the mainstream, because all of us possess stigmatized attributes, we all encounter pressure to cover. So a lot of the times when we talk about covering, people think, oh, minorities cover, women cover, right? That's not true, right? Everybody has a tendency to cover something. You might cover that you have an illness. You might cover that you're dyslexic. You might cover that you have struggles at home. A lot of the times, especially, this is research, I'm not making this up. They found a big amount of people who cover are white men. And the reason is because especially if they're single dads, or if they had cancer, or if they struggle with sexuality, any of those things, or if they're Christian, right, depending where you work, your religious views, they had to cover it because they couldn't be open about it because they might not be in the in-group, right? Now, a lot of the times, if you have that kind of environment in any institution where you feel like there's a certain in-group, then you have to cover your disfavorable traits to get into that in-group, right? There's an institution that I used to work at where we used to call them Ken and Barbies. The people who were chosen to be in certain positions in that institution either looked like a Ken doll or a Barbie doll. And I don't know if they knew they were doing that. It's probably unconscious, right? These people loved Jesus, right? But for some reason, all the VPs and all the people who are directors look like Ken and Barbie dolls, right? So unconsciously, they were picking a certain type of look. So in other words, if you wanted to be in the in-group, you had to start dressing, acting, and looking like that group. These are the things you need to be aware of when you start a ministry, when you start a missions trip, when you form a team, when you look for people to work with. Make sure it's emotionally safe for everyone to be open and honest about their lives, right? So how does covering have to do anything with bias, right? So, wait, we don't have time for this, sorry. All right, so let's talk about a little bit more about bias. The most common bias is called affinity bias. Affinity bias is the tendency to warm up, to give preferences to people in our in-group or people like us. I teach at 3 different institutions, and one institution, one of the students say, if you don't play sports, I have nothing to talk to you about, or if you don't work out. He's like, I'm a gym rat. I'm either at the gym or I play sports. So if you don't have any of those things, then we have nothing in common. And I said, okay, well, if you ever become a senior pastor, you better not just hire sports people, because I have been in a room where I was sitting there and I was like, and honestly, in the room, I had the highest degree, but it didn't matter. There's a bunch of guys who played sports, and this VP only hired those who were previously on a sports team. So all they did was talk about sports, and I was completely left out of the conversation. And he flat out said, I like to hire those who played sports because they're competitive. And then I looked around and I said, oh, so your hiring criteria was sports players, right? You need to be careful if you're in a position of making a team or hiring a team that not everybody is your buddy, okay? If you only work with your buddies, you will never have a wide perspective. If we had 2 hours, I would have everybody write down 5 people who are closest to you by age, language, gender, education level, ethnicity, like these different categories, and tell you who are your closest 5 people, what do they look like. And a lot of the times, this is normal, you'll find the 5 closest people who look like you and act like you are in those 5, okay? Your 5 closest people will have all the same values as you. I did it the first time, and I was like, oh no, literally everyone's Asian. So I was like, okay, we need to change this, right? So everybody was Asian, everybody had at least a master's, and everybody was Christian. So I was like, okay, I need to change my inner circle. You know why? Because I needed to hear what other people thought. Or else, you become very prideful if all you hear around you is, oh yes, I agree with you, everything you say is right. No, I need my Democratic friend who believes that abortion is okay and her sister is a LGBTQ counselor for kids to feel comfortable in their whatever sexuality there is to be my friend. And the reason is because I need to know what people are saying outside the Christian bubble, okay? So affinity bias, a lot of the times you will seek all of your closest friendships as somebody who is very similar to yourself, right? So I just want you to be aware of, look at your affinity bias. If you are hiring or creating a team, you do not leave that room until you find something common in every person who came to interview, right? Because if you only find something common in the 3 people out of the 10 people you interviewed, most likely you'll pick one of the 3. Are they qualified for the job? May not be, but you had something similar to them, so you'll remember them, right? So you want to make sure all 10 people, you found something that you had common with them, that you enjoy doing, and then everybody has an equal playing field, okay? So what does affinity bias might sound like? What would somebody with affinity bias say? They might say, they remind me of myself when I was younger, right? They were born and raised here, so they should fit in well. In other words, you're finding commonalities. Oh, you put them in a category already, right? We go to church together. I know they'll be a great leader. Trust me, there's a lot of people who go to my church that I cannot say this about. But if I said this about, then what am I saying? I'm assuming because they went to the same church as me, they can become a leader? No, absolutely not, all right? So another one is confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is a tendency to seek information that confirms pre-existing beliefs or assumptions. Okay, I'm gonna tell you something shocking. I told you ethnically I am Korean, right? Somebody could, by the way, this actually happens all the time, okay? I'm just gonna let you know. You're Korean. I love kimchi. You know how many times I say that? Like, I've heard that in my life, right? Oh, I love kimchi. I'm like, oh, really? Actually, I don't eat kimchi. That's usually the reaction. Some Koreans tell me to give me back their Korean card. I was like, sure, because I'm American, right? So I was like, what Korean card? All right, anyway, all of that to say, you could think because I read that the traditional kimchi is a Korean spicy cabbage, pickled spicy cabbage, okay, in case you don't know what it is, right? So you could hear that I watched a Korean drama or I watched something or I heard somewhere that Koreans' most popular dish is kimchi. Therefore, I went to a Korean restaurant and I saw a bunch of Koreans eating kimchi. Therefore, in the middle, I have concluded all Koreans eat kimchi. No. Actually, my cousin doesn't either, and he's actually Korean. All right, so I'm just saying a lot of the times we can have generalizations. Oh, okay, don't get mad. This is not me saying this, okay? This is another faculty who told me this. One faculty, when I just started teaching, told me, oh, who's in your class? I was like, blah, 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 right? This didn't happen here, by the way, so everybody calm down. You have Brazilian students in your class. They're going to come late. They're going to come late to class, right? Okay, I said calm down, jeez, okay. All right, so they said they're gonna come late to class. Now think about it. I'm a new professor. Somebody has programmed in my brain that Brazilians come late to class, okay? This was my first semester teaching. Somebody who is more experienced than me told me Brazilians will come late to class. First day of class, my 2 Brazilian students showed up 10 minutes late. All right? So, do I conclude from then on out, all Brazilians come late to class? It was very easy for me to do that. Okay? That could have been that little orange area, right? But instead, I waited. I found out that week, the first week of class, they were lost. They didn't know what the classroom was, right? And then after that, they came on time, right? But it would have been very easy for me to conclude from then on out because somebody who had more influence told me, programmed in my brain, that Brazilians come late to class. I could have believed it and ran with it, okay? That is how programming works. Think about what people have told you and what you believed and just ran with it. That's called confirmation bias, right? Now, what confirmation can sound like, we can survey people, but I already know what they're gonna say, right? oh, you have Brazilians in your class? I already know they're coming late, right? I know, after this, I'm gonna get like really weird feedback. She's really mean to Brazilians. All right, next one. Surprise, surprise, Alex didn't speak up just like all the other Asians on the team, right? Asians are generally known to be quiet in class, right? Until they meet me. We tried something like that before and it didn't work. Let's stick with what we know because you've already decided what you believe in, right? It should be normal for you to question what you believe in. Isn't that how we became Christians, right? You don't just question your faith, you question what people have told you about certain things, certain people, certain groups of people, right? Microaggressions and microaffirmations. So microaggressions are the slight, subtle, and snubs that devalue people. Let me give you the one that I hate the most. Where are you from? Oh, San Jose, California? No. Where are you from? Before San Jose, California? You mean like my mom's womb? So I purposely play stupid, right? Because they're constantly trying to find out my ethnicity. Now the problem is, I just told you I'm from San Jose, California. Where is San Jose, California? United States. Did I just tell you I'm American? Yes. But what is the other person constantly asking me? Where are you from? You're not from here. That is what they're asking me. That is what they're telling me. You're not from here. You're not from here. No. I'm from San Jose, California. No. Where are you really from? My mom's womb. Like, what do you want from me, right? Constantly asking somebody where they're from when they told you where they're from is inappropriate. Okay? So then I usually ask them, then where are you from? And if they say they're from Pittsburgh, whatever, I say, oh, then so are you Amish? Right. Yeah. So I do it back to them so they know what it feels like, right? So that's a microaggression, right? It's like, I know you're just like, that's not biblical, right? And calm down. All right, so microaggression, and it's usually because they don't know what they're doing until you do it back to them, right? And then I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just like, oh, if you're going to generalize that I'm not from here, then let me tell you what you're not from here either. Unless you're actually Native American, technically you're not from here. All right? Okay. So, microaggression, that's a microaggression, right? Another microaggression is when somebody constantly calls you the wrong name, right? Because that means they didn't take the time to find out who you actually are. This happens to me a lot. There's 2 ethnically Korean faculty in all of Dallas Baptist University, just 2. I work at the Cook School Leadership. The other one works in the College of Business. Do you know how many times I've been called Judy? I was like, are you kidding me? The worst part was the people who call me Judy actually work with Judy. So they don't work with me. So I'm like, wait, hold on. Not only do you not know what your own coworker looks like, you think I'm her. That's pretty bad. Right? Okay, so microaggression is when you don't take the time to get to know somebody and you say things just I teach group fitness, right? I don't know if you've heard. Okay, so I teach group fitness, and we have this thing called a band. It's like a round band, and we put it over our knees to do like squats. And while I was teaching, my band snapped, which means it broke in half. So I was just like, yes, all right? And then it's like, I got spanked by my own band. It's really hard to snap those things, by the way. So I told the instructor after me, it's like, oh, I snapped a band. And she's like, what color? Red. And red is the second easiest. And she's like, well, that's nothing to be proud about. I was like, okay, that's a microaggression, right? She might think that she's being funny, but at the same time, you're saying something just enough to poke somebody, right? The subtleness of it. Right? So we don't want to do that. What we do want to do is microaffirmations. And microaffirmations are small gestures that uplift people. Right? Uplift people. It is the opposite of microaggression, right? Small intentional acts that occur when people show they want another to succeed. All right? This is where getting to know somebody matters, right? Some people love public praise. Some people rather die than be praised publicly. Know your team, okay? Know your team, right? Our senior pastor likes parties. So every time he has a birthday or whatever, we throw him a party. Our youth pastor, she's an introvert and she's very shy. She's great with the teenagers, but she hates being put on public. Her wedding had 10 people, okay? That's how much she doesn't like public stuff. So they're like, oh, it's your 10-year anniversary at our church. Do you want to have a party? She said, I'd rather quit. Know what your people want. If you do the same thing for everybody, it might not be a micro-affirmation. At that point, it's just torture, right? So know your team. Know your team. Okay, now, one of the things that people need to be aware of is if you say a microaggression thing, if you say something that's inappropriate, and you're human, so this is bound to happen. Let's not pretend that we never made a mistake. For example, somebody said to me, culture and intelligence cannot be in the same sentence, right? And I said, wow, that's really rude. And he was a very high up judge in the United States who said that to me. But he was a friend of a friend. So I told my friend who wanted me to work with this judge, he's like, hey, so what do you think? Do you want to work with him? And I said, absolutely not. I don't work with people I don't feel comfortable with. Like, why would I put myself in that situation when he flat out told me he disrespected me, right? And then he started making all these excuses for the judge. Oh, he's just really high up. Oh, he's elderly. Oh, he's just not as cultured as you are. Oh, blah, 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 blah. We call that explaining away, okay? You explain away the microaggressor by giving excuses for them. You know what you should say at that point? Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I said that to you. I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry that happened to you. Is there anything I can do to help you? That is the attitude of somebody who, one, practices humility, and two, cares about the person. Not having the person thrown under a bus, okay? Do you know what that means? Just making sure, okay? When you, let's say, sorry, what's your name? Fernanda. Fernanda told me that somebody said really mean to her. Fernanda, just get over it. It's fine. That's just who they are, blah, blah. What I'm doing is I'm putting the blame on Fernanda. You're the problem. You couldn't get over it. It's your issue, right? That's what you're doing. Please, please do not do that. If somebody comes to you because they felt hurt by what you said, the easiest thing for you to do, honestly, as humans, because we're prideful naturally, is to blame it back on them. Oh, it's not me, it's you, right? No, it's you. It's you. Say sorry, because it's you, okay? So these are all the excuses I've heard. These are actually excuses that I've wrote down I've heard before. The best one is, what's wrong with you? Can't you take a joke? You're so serious. Gosh, you're so sensitive, right? Okay, thank you. All right, we're running out of time, and I want to have enough time for questions. Okay, so all of this to say, by the way, my class, we're going to go through this again because I didn't get through all of them. All right, honor and respect. The desire to treat others with honor and respect doesn't automatically mean our behavior comes across as dignifying and kind. There are various adaptations necessary in order to ensure people experience respect and honor from us. This is from David Livermore's Leading with Cultural Intelligence. If you like to read, I highly, highly recommend his book, right? Now, a lot of the times when it comes to these kind of situations, we like to give excuses because we don't want to create conflict. It is normal, it is very normal if there is a uncomfortable situation for you to not want to deal with it, okay? It's normal. That is what normal people do, okay? Excuses. So, it's none of my business. Let's say I was sitting next to Fernanda. Wait, sorry, what's your name? Yeah. You hesitated. Is that surely your name? Is it Danny? Okay, he's not making this up, right? Right. So let's say I was mean to Fernanda, right? At that point, Danny has two choices. He can either speak up or he could not say anything, right? At some point, if you feel like somebody is being microaggressed, you need to speak up. Most of the time, this is the attitude of what Danny would take, like not that I actually know him. Most people are, let's say most people are Danny. This is what he would normally say. It's none of my business. It's just Dr. Chia and Fernanda talking, so it's none of my business, right? If I say something, it may come back to me. She might give me an F, right? I don't want to stick my neck out. I want people to like me. Someone else should do it, right? That is what usually unconsciously will go through your head. No, it's not my business. That is normal. That is what unconsciously will go through your head. What at that point, if you're on, not system 1, but system 2, where you are conscious, that is the time when you actually become an advocate. And you become an advocate by applying and engage, you don't ignore it, right? Encourage others to resist pressures to cover aspects of their identities. And address microaggressions on behalf of others. Dr. Chia, what you said was inappropriate. Or you can ask Fernanda, are you okay? Do you want me to talk to her on your behalf? I'll go with you. I was there with you, right? Even if you don't say it at the spot, you can always take it back. Be aware of who may feel like an outsider and what can you do to invite them in. Because ultimately, extraordinary people, good people are not those who lack flaws. The brave are not those who feel no fear. And the generous are not those who never feel selfish. Extraordinary people are not extraordinary because they are invulnerable to unconscious biases. They are extraordinary because they choose to do something about it. Choose to do something about the things you are not aware of. Choose to do something that you are scared of. Choose to do something about it. Learn something about it. If you are not familiar with something, before you make a conclusion about it, take the time to get to know it. All right, I know that was really fast. It was a lot. It is probably one of the most academically compacted lectures you've had here, so I'm sorry, but this is too, oh, thanks, you're so sweet. All right, okay. All right, there you go. All right, any questions, taking questions? I wish we had more time. I usually have a lot of games, but no games, just talk. Questions? Thank you. All right. Questions? All right. Oh.
So I have a coworker who's become a friend. He's still back in San Antonio, but our beliefs could not be San Antonio. Anyway, our beliefs could not be any more different. Mm-hmm. I'm a Christian. He's ex-Catholic, walked away from the faith, and he's been recently getting into philosophy, all sorts of, good things. But, and I use good very quotationally, but anyway, my question is more so, when in terms of him being in my inner circle now, we're having very intense discussions right now, which is, great, but where should I find the balance between him still being in my circle and me speaking life into him? And then there's some days where I'm just absolutely exhausted after talking to him.
Yes, I understand what you mean. Okay, I'm not saying I'm not pro-Israel, but my Jewish friend, who I'm really close with, is so pro-Israel that she sends me nonstop reels about pro-Israel stuff. And I'm like, girlfriend, you need to stop, right? So it's exhausting. It can be tiring. And because when you have your inner circle and you have somebody who is very different than you, because it's not comfortable, it is exhausting. Your natural tendency is to go to somebody who is comfortable, right? Yes, most of your inner circle should be somebody who you're comfortable with. But, so for example, I am not far right-wing Republican, okay? I don't swing any way very far. I'm very moderate. I had a student who was extremely far right-wing, who is a gun-carrying, MAGA hat-wearing, Donald Trump is the next Jesus kind of guy, right? I kid you not, okay? So, but him and I would sit down and have these really intense conversations, but so it's almost like you have to change your mind a little bit, okay? Because there's nothing you can control about him, right? But in some ways, after the conversation, I almost felt like I was blessed in a weird way because I understand it forces you to have empathy and sympathy for a totally different side that is unsaved, right? If you detach yourself from them completely, you will not know how to love and minister to him or people who work or act or believe the things that he believes, right? So ministry is exhausting, okay? Anything that is not comfortable to you is exhausting. You do need to put good boundaries, but this is extremely good for you, right? So it's almost like he's a friend, but also he's an exercise for you to keep you on your toes, right? You don't want to only hang out with Christians. There's a reason why I'm a group fitness instructor. I work at Lifetime because Lifetime is not Christian. All June is Pride Month. Let me just tell you that, okay? So just letting you know, if you want to be effective, learn how to love people in your inner circle who are not Christian, right? Because it will keep you grounded. It'll make you pray harder, right? And you have to spend time in the Word of God to reground you, right? But it almost keeps you on your toes. I hope I answered your question. Okay. Any more questions? Any questions? Yes.
Are there any situations where, okay, so slight culture context. I am an Israeli, and in Israel, you don't really care if people are, give microaggressions or whatever. So I guess I'm curious, are there any situations where it's okay to just kind of take it or what? I don't know.
Okay, yes, I understand what you're saying. Okay. Very similar. The Asian culture, we're used to just jabbing a little, and that's just part of the culture, right? So, which is fine if you're in that context and that is what you do to each other, right? But if you live in the United States, that is inappropriate, right? That is inappropriate. So if you come from a country where it's okay to do that, cultural intelligence means you have to adapt, or else you won't get along at work. You won't get along. Like, there's some people who just come to work and they're used to doing that back home who should not do that. For example, there's a guy who formerly went to CFNI. Sorry, he's also Brazilian. Sorry. Hey, it's not my fault a lot of you guys transferred to DBU, all right? Who came to DBU, and if you look at the DBU Caucasian population, it's very large, right? He was very friendly. He was very open. He gave a lot of hugs. He gave a lot of not side hugs, like full frontal hugs, very friendly, very touchy-feely. That was his love language, okay? Right? He did that, and people thought he was a player. And he got a bad reputation at DBU. But he was like, I don't understand. This is how we talk to each other and love each other in Brazil. And I was like, you're in Dallas Baptist University. You're not allowed to love each other like that here. Okay? So, context, right? Cultural context. It might be okay where you are from, but when you go to a different context, it is not okay. My older son is not touchy-feely. If I go like, JJ, can I hug you? And I hug him, he's like, I think this is long enough, right? Same family. Younger one, I hug him. He's like, I'm going to hug you forever. I'm like, yay, right? So same family, totally different. That's why you need to get to know the individual, right? So the question is, if you got to know their culture, are they trying to be rude or is that just who they are, right? I have 1 minute left, enough for one question, and then I have to end it. So last question, yes.
I'm going to ask Alex to sum up my questions.
Okay, so what she said is, how do you find the balance between addressing microaggressions against your culture and having a safe space where they can learn about your culture without risking offending you?
That's a very good question. Okay, so that's a two-part question. So you're asking how do you address the microaggression without offending them with their culture, right? That's actually very hard because if you think about it, the Korean culture has a lot of microaggressions, and there are times where I had to tell my parents that was inappropriate. My dad did not get it, right? He's just like, I don't understand. We joke like this all the time. And then he would explain away and blame the problem on me, right? there's sometimes you have to understand you cannot change people. But what you can change is your silence, right? Constantly, if you need to, don't worry about offending them in some ways because they are offending you, okay? At some point, you need to say something. It's called death by 1,000 cuts, right? Slowly, you get chipped away. If you don't say something sooner, that 1,000 cut is where you will explode. And they won't know why you're exploding over something so small. Like, why are you overreacting is what the question becomes, right? But if you constantly bring up, I didn't like it when you said that. I didn't like it when you said that. That's not nice. That's hurtful. Like, especially if you're a third culture kid where you grew up in many different cultures, your parents are different cultures than you have to address it because you're not the same culture as them. And you almost have to teach it to them, but you have to teach it to them slowly and not by exploding and getting so mad that you stop talking to them altogether, right? That's the risk that most people take, is that they wait till they explode and it just becomes ugly, right? I hope I answered your question. If not, then come talk to me after. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Hey guys, just before you go, I know you guys are rushing. Can we stand and let's just appreciate our guests for coming today and sharing? Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Jade. Thank you. All right, they're rushing to lunch and some of them have to go to work, so that's why they're rushing. But anyway, God bless.